Good afternoon and good morning to everyone. Hi, my name is Calder Justice, and we thank you for joining us on this webinar to discuss the Salesforce Spring 16 release. Along with me, I have Ernest Lessinger and John Hulina, and Ernest will be facilitating the webinar, and John will be chiming in and also pointing out different places where the Spring 16 release adds value. Let me tell you a little bit about EnablePath. We are a Salesforce Platinum partner. We have hundreds of certified architects and consultants. We have over 360 Salesforce certifications. We have a very long list of successful projects and happy customers. If these strong metrics that you're seeing on the screen aren't enough for you, let us know. We'd be more than happy to get you in touch with any of our happy clients and let them tell you their story and how their experience went with us. Now I'd like to give you an overview on our Lens tool. It's a powerful analysis tool brought to you by EnablePath, the solutions team here. And the tool provides you deep insights into the current state of any size of a Salesforce org. Doesn't matter if it's big or small, this will provide a very in-depth analysis of the health of your instance. Let us know if you're interested in this. We're very excited about the very powerful tool. It provides visibility through a summary report card along with a detailed analysis of every field and process. So let us know. We'd be more than happy to give you an example and show you how it will help you and will add value to your org. Now I'm going to hand this over to Ernest. He's going to go through the agenda and then dive right into the webinar. So have fun, guys.
Excellent. Thank you, Calder. So as most of you on this call know, in these webinars, what we try to do is give you an overview of what we consider to be the most interesting features of each new Salesforce release. And we actually started doing these webinars. I started doing them several years ago before I even came to EnablePath, but we've been doing them at EnablePath here for almost 2 years now. And what we found is that Salesforce's release notes, as well as their release management, meaning their webinars and their partner readiness and so forth, has really improved by leaps and bounds over the last few years. So if you have not already, I strongly recommend that you print out or look at the release notes on the web. I personally think that printing the PDF or getting it on my Kindle and reading through the PDF is easier to work with than their web interface. But you have many options to choose from, including the printable PDF, an HTML-based interface, multiple different webinars, including partner webinars and customer release readiness webinars, overview webinars, as well as Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, mobile, and Lightning-specific material. So there's a ton of material out there. What we try to do in these webinars that's a little bit different from what Salesforce does is we try to tell you about what we think actually matters. We're not here to sell you Salesforce, at least not on this call, and we're not here to sell you on any particular Salesforce feature. We're not product managers. And in fact, just a reminder, we are not Salesforce. So a lot of the pictures that you see and a lot of the images that you see are actually taken from Salesforce's release notes. Generally, because the best way to demonstrate the Salesforce functionality and to show you graphically what's going on is to use the graphics that Salesforce has created. And again, if you want to learn information, and in a few places we'll strongly advise you to go to the release notes, you'll see a lot of these same pictures there. So that's the agenda. I'm not going to go over the whole thing right now, but I do want to talk about today's goals. So the Spring 16 release notes are 417 pages long. I think, Calder, you told me earlier that's about 30 pages shorter than the previous release notes. The previous release notes, though, I think was almost 25% longer than it had been in the past. I think a couple years ago we were looking anywhere from 150 to 200 pages, and now we're up at a hefty 417 pages long. Some of that is better indexing. A big chunk of the document is indexing, and frankly, when I print it out, I just throw that immediately in the shredder. But a large amount of it is extremely valuable content, so again, recommend you read it. Um, the themes for Spring 16, and we'll talk to you a little bit about that right now. Spring 16 is not, in my opinion, a very interesting release. So we might actually let you you out of this webinar a little bit early. Now, what I mean by that is there's a ton going on behind the scenes. There's a lot of improvements being done to Lightning Experience, a lot of work being done on Lightning Components, a ton of work being done on the back end on things that are not traditionally part of a Salesforce release. So a huge amount going on with Heroku, a huge amount going on with Pardot, a lot going on with Salesforce security, especially around their Shield product. Lightning Connect, which is quite a simple product in its implementation, although I'm sure it's quite complicated in the back end. All of these are in place, and Salesforce is making massive improvements to them. But as far as the user-facing components of Salesforce, the pieces that actually create technology debt or process debt for you, where if you don't address them quickly, that you might come back later in a month or 2 months or 2 years and say, man, I wish I'd used the Salesforce technology instead of building something from scratch, or I wish I'd taken the time previously to embrace what Salesforce released. Not so much of that in this release. It does happen more in the Salesforce Dreamforce adjacent releases. So what's in Spring 16? Some massive improvements to Lightning Experience. I'll talk about those in a few minutes. One very dramatic improvement to both the sales and the service process. Some improvements to Service Cloud that will be really interesting to people who are doing field service work. Some continued improvements in mobile. Some major changes in communities. So the communities, particularly the Napoli template, which is my favorite, has some improvements. And just overall, Salesforce is improving their collaboration. It's improving file management, which has been something I've been hoping for a long time. And then they've added abilities around chatter, around profiles, just to increase adoption and increase usability. So we'll talk about each of those in more depth. Before we get started, I'll talk briefly about our next webinar. We're working on 2 internal case studies right now. One is building out a Lightning component as a managed package. This is a very simple personality profile, perfect for putting on a chatter group, putting on a user profile with a questionnaire. It means that we get to build out a Lightning component that can be included on a page. That capability is, I believe, still in pilot in Spring 16. It also gives us a chatter component that can be added to a Visualforce page, or excuse me, a Lightning component that can be added to a Visualforce page. It lets us play around with events. It lets us play around with Aura-enabled Apex classes and so forth. But it's still relatively simple. So we'll be doing a demo of that in a webinar coming up in a few weeks, just to show everybody what we've done and to give you some lessons learned on this, what I consider to be one of the first really truly usable Lightning component releases. And then we'll also be talking about using Lightning Experience with the EnablePath timecard system. So EnablePath is building out our new project management platform from scratch. That's part of a migration onto a different accounting system, and as a result, we no longer need to do accounting within Salesforce. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this opportunity and build out a really incredible project management platform with status updates and project status, time card status, and so forth that will give us resource utilization, resource availability, as well as project status, using some of our partners, including Congamerge and others, to build out this platform that we think will really take our customer service to the next level. And that's a combination of Visualforce pages, triggers, process builder flows, and custom actions. I've got it to the point now where I think I'm going to be able to do an entire project management system with only 2 or 3 triggers, and I'll talk about why those are necessary and what I've replaced them with in our webinar. So we haven't scheduled the day for this yet. We want to make sure that we have the work done before we actually schedule a date, but we're coming up on being able to demo that, so we'll get that invitation out for you in the next couple weeks. So talking about the Salesforce enhancements, some general enhancements. Duplicate management is now turned on for new Salesforce orgs. And then it's now possible, really an important enhancement for me at least, to enable inline editing in Lightning Experience, as well as support for formula fields. If you recall, in the previous release, Salesforce did not support hyperlinks in formula fields and did not support images in formula fields, especially in inline lists, or particularly in inline lists and Lightning Experience. Those are two features that are used extensively, especially by customers of ours who do a lot of back office processing, real estate agencies, collection agencies, high volume call centers, and customers who really need those list views and reports to have that graphical indicator in them. That's now possible. Email templates and letterheads no longer support embedded JavaScript, and then supported browsers have changed a little bit. I'm not going to go through what all that means, but you can and should go in and look at the Salesforce release notes. But I will give you a reminder, if you are using Internet Explorer 8, you definitely need to be moving on to a newer browser because Salesforce has been moving more and more aggressively towards HTML5. I don't have the release notes in front of me, but I believe Internet Explorer 8 is simply no longer supported. A few critical updates in this release. Specifically, critical updates have been postponed. Serving static resources from the Visualforce domain, which is necessary to avoid some cross-domain scripting errors that might happen, especially in Lightning Experience. A behavior change for get content and get content as PDF methods. And then some changes to how encryption key management permissions and so forth are managed. I assume that these have been postponed because as they go through and do their tests, they're finding that users are not modifying their Visualforce pages and modifying their Apex classes. I don't actually know the reason for that. But if you are using static resources in Visualforce, and especially if you're choosing to use hard-coded links to static resources rather than using the URL for and resource global variable in Visualforce, which would automatically correct all of your URLs if you were using those. But if you're using hard-coded links to static resources, you should not be. Similarly, if you're using get content and get content as PDF methods to generate usually either CSV files or PDF files as a result of a button click or as a result of a trigger fire, then it's a good idea to go through and just look at how you're doing that. Not only because of this critical update, but also because there have been some changes to how those PDFs are rendered. And you might actually have more favorable Salesforce limits as a result of some changes that are happening in Spring 16. So read the release notes on that. So changes to Wave Analytics. Wave continues to become more mainstream. They've normalized the pricing a little bit for Wave. They've made it easier to write not quite real-time, but very near real-time asynchronous integrations directly from Salesforce into Wave. Now, Wave now supports standard and custom actions directly from within Wave dashboards and from within Wave tables. And in Spring 16, they're adding a new drag-and-drop dashboard designer with automatic support for data facets, some built-in tools to edit the Salesforce Analytics query language, and JSON code that run behind your lenses, and then some new chart types. They've also added support for derived fields in your data flows within Wave. And this is particularly important for those of you who might have been holding off using Wave because you maybe needed to do some data transformation that required an ETL tool, which always seemed a little bit silly. Well, Salesforce thought so too, and now they've added the ability to do a lot more derivation of data and a lot more transformation of data from directly within the Wave platform. Changes to Salesforce 1. No real significant changes to Salesforce 1 from our perspective. As always, definitely read the release notes, especially if you have this rolled out to multiple customers. But Salesforce does continue to push desktop and mobile experiences together into a tighter environment. What I mean by that is they are starting to give you the ability, you've had the ability to add Lightning components to mobile apps for quite a while, 2 or 3 releases now, if not more. But you are actually getting the ability to add Lightning actions to Salesforce Lightning experience that also appear in Salesforce 1 Mobile.
Yes, the other thing that's new is assets are now available in the Salesforce One mobile browser. So if you're using assets to be able to track what products a customer has bought, you now can be on site on your tablet and look that up and be able to check serial numbers or whatever else you need to do for that customer.
Excellent, thank you, John. Yes, and that's a big deal for those of you who are using field service. Salesforce also, it wasn't included in the release notes, but Salesforce did come out with a new version of their mobile SDK. I think it's version 4, but please don't quote me on that. In the last, so somebody's asked me to go back one slide. In the last few months. And I know that made a huge improvement to our ability to do things like offline access to Salesforce data, as well as our ability to link in and out of a Salesforce app. For those of you, or out of the Salesforce mobile app. So for those of you who want to use the Salesforce mobile SDK to access data, but who maybe have other mobile apps that you've developed for other parts of the business that take and change their behavior based on URL links within other apps, you now have the ability to trigger those and consume them using the mobile SDK. So that's kind of a nice feature, and they can actually be triggered from Lightning components and Visualforce pages as well within the iOS app at least. So that's kind of nice. Okay, so changes to communities. A lot of new community components, and I chose not to go through all of the new community components, but a lot of them are really around collaboration and around chatter in communities. In particular, groups are now supported in Napoli, user profiles have been enhanced, and then there have been some just general improvements to templates, template management, and so forth. In particular, the rich text object, or the rich text component, now supports images and videos. So if you've been using the Napoli template or any of the other templates, and you've found that your communities maybe look a little bit bland, and you've been looking at maybe writing Visualforce pages, writing custom components, and so forth to add images, well, now you can add images and videos and really bring that, I don't know what the term is now. It used to be everything was Web 2.0. But really bring that modern aesthetic with the large graphical images, pictures of people wearing headphones and holding torches and things like that in a good way. You can now add those to your community and really improve the user experience. Additionally, communities now allow reports and dashboards to be created by any license that has a role. Which I believe includes Customer Community Plus and Partner Community. I don't believe that includes Customer Community. Certainly does not include the high volume Customer Community.
Yeah, that's correct. So dashboards and communities were pretty worthless without being able to refresh them until now. So now that the users can refresh them, definitely look at adding some dashboards to help enhance the experience. And also for reports, especially with partner communities, you can really help drive adoption now that your external users can create their own reports.
Thank you, John. And then, as always, because communities are customer-facing, I strongly recommend that your business users and your admins and developers read the release notes very carefully. You should have already done it at this point. I hate to say it, but it might be a little bit too late. Salesforce is releasing the new versions in the next couple of weeks. They will not automatically upgrade your community templates, however, so you have a little bit of a reprieve there. But you should be planning to upgrade your community templates. You should be planning to take care of those, to take advantage of those new releases. In order to do that, you need to read the release notes very carefully, and you should do that for any feature in Salesforce, but particularly any feature that is customer-facing. Okay, so changes to the Sales Cloud. Not a ton of additions here. Definitely go in and look at the release notes, however, because the big change that I'm seeing is a feature that was added a few releases ago to Salesforce Console, and that's global actions in compose windows. For those of you who have used Gmail, for example, whenever you compose an email in Gmail, you don't get a new page with a big, wide email composer. what you get is a little, maybe about a quarter of the screen gets covered by a collapsible compose window that you can use to write emails. Well, Salesforce now supports that for both email composers and global actions, which is a great new feature. And it starts to get to how Salesforce plans to address data density issues in the Lightning UI. One of the challenges that I've had with Lightning Experience over the past few months is that it seems to be even less data dense than the current user interface. And part of the reason for that is that they want to make it possible for you to configure, click to configure, elements in Salesforce that work equally well on mobile and desktop and tablet. And in order to do that, you give up some of that data density that you might otherwise get. Also, if you're on a mobile device, and most mobile devices are still bandwidth constrained, there's a limit to how much data you can actually show on the page. Well, these global composer windows and global actions and email composer windows are part of how they address that data density issue. And I hope that they'll be adding that same feature to other elements. Of course, I don't work for Salesforce, so when I say I hope, that's only a hope. So the same capability has been added for activities. It is now also possible to send emails from campaigns, send emails from cases, and there have been major improvements to email templates. So particularly for those of you who are currently using Outlook plugins, for example, and might want to think again about maybe using Salesforce to send and receive email, a lot of these new email features are only available in Lightning Experience. So I do recommend that you go into a sandbox, enable Lightning Experience, play around with it a little bit, and see whether maybe the new email features will address some of your needs. So improvements to data.com, basically adding more of data.com and Lightning Experience. And then data.com clean is now available for leads. Social key is still on its way to being retired. And then data.com prospector has been added to Lightning Experience so that you can connect to the right contacts and get a 360-degree view of the prospect. On the Service Cloud side, some of these are repeats that are not actually in the Spring 16 release notes, but I wanted to bring them up because they're so cool. So the SOS video chat and screen sharing from Salesforce One, from Salesforce Mobile, directly into the Salesforce UI via a live agent-like capability. Very cool. Unfortunately, I have not had a use case to play around with it, and I just need to make some time. Some improvements to live agent chat transfer. So for those of you who maybe are not using live agent because you've been worried about how agents transfer from one agent to another, especially in a large call center or in a multi-tier call center, you might want to take a look at those release notes and see how they've changed. Lightning Experience in Service Cloud has added assets and case feeds and work orders, and I think John's going to have some comments on that in a little bit. Omni-channel routing. Again, omni-channel is not new, but automatic reroute if the initial routing is not accepted in a certain amount of time is now supported. And for those of you who have not played around with omni-channel, I strongly advise that you do so. Omni-channel is a way for you to route any Salesforce object, any custom Salesforce object, and some standard Salesforce objects to agents the same way that live agent works. So skills-based routing for things that are not chats and things that are not phone calls, and that's a pretty cool feature. Salesforce Console for Service, or Console in general, now allows you to preview the contents of a tab by hovering over that tab, and you can use the API. So this isn't a click to configure, but you can now use the API to prevent users from closing tabs before their work is done. That's a big deal both for workflow and workforce management, as well as just for error prevention, right? You'd hate to be working on a project or working on a call. Maybe you've saved your work, but you're not done, and you accidentally close the wrong tab. Well, now you can add the ability to prevent closing tabs using the API. John, did you have any more comments on the Service Cloud there?
Salesforce announced this week Field Service Lightning. It's in the big announcement they had on Tuesday for their kickoff. So obviously the first two elements of that are work orders and what they're calling complex asset hierarchies. So the complex asset hierarchies now will be able to support your bill of materials in Salesforce. And then, of course, work orders you can use in a variety of different ways. An example is if you've got a preventive service contract, you can now automatically create a work order, and that's going to represent when that periodic maintenance checkup should happen.
Excellent, thank you.
And the one thing that's not available, the dispatch and scheduling that you would need, in a robust field service applications, not available yet.
And I actually have a good friend and former employee of mine from a few years ago who works on the field service team there at Salesforce. And I know back at Dreamforce, she was very excited about this. I understand they didn't quite make it in time for Dreamforce, but they had the whole team there meeting with people, and she was just very excited. So I'm looking forward to seeing how the field service capabilities evolve over the next few releases. So improvements to Chatter. Again, nothing really earth-shattering, but a lot of really nice general improvements. So broadcast groups are now generally available. Broadcast groups are a way for you to create a group that only administrators can post to. And I know that this, to a certain extent, and for some customers, this goes against the concept of Salesforce as a collaboration tool. I personally like to say Chatter is not a replacement for library science. Broadcast groups are a way for you to create curated groups, for example, HR groups or office announcement groups, disaster recovery groups, and so forth, where what you really need to do is limit the chatter with a lowercase c in that group to ensure that what is posted is paid attention to. Well written, spell checked, and maybe it's information that you need customers or employees to know, but that you don't really want collaboration on. So this is not a collaboration, this is more of a communication group. The ability to add more groups, so I believe employees and users in general can now be members of more groups, and you can add more groups into Salesforce. The UI has been a little bit optimized, as well as the limits. Salesforce Files, which was added, I believe, in the last release, but is now being fully implemented, are now available on to replace notes and attachments, and files are no longer required, no longer require chatter. So that's a great improvement, and the big difference there is, unlike attachments, files can have documents up to 2 gigabytes. They can be associated to multiple objects. They can be shared with different users other than the owner of the record. So a much more powerful way to attach documents to a particular record. Some changes to Chatter Messenger. Again, read the release notes. This is something that will affect your end users. And then just general improvements to user profiles and group profiles, as well as the ability to mute posts. So again, if the collaboration on a particular post is getting out of control, or maybe it's just a post that is not particularly interesting to you right now, you can mute that post. He said distinctly, and it will become unmuted automatically if you're mentioned. So deployment enhancements. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, just comment there. I mean, the notes and attachments related list has always been very confusing for users. It's confusing on when and where they should put their notes, call logs, etc. And when should they use attachments? When should they use files? Now you have, even if you're not using Chatter, you have the ability. You can turn off or remove that notes and attachments related list, and go with a separate files related list and a separate notes related list. So that'll help eliminate that confusion.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so on the deployment side, it's now possible to create sets of commonly used unit tests, which you were always able to go in and choose which unit tests you wanted to run, but you can now do that formally and create sets of common unit tests so that you can run those as a group, which can definitely speed up unit testing in a risk-based environment. For example, if you know that changing a particular component is likely to be tested by a specific set of unit tests, you can build out a set for that purpose, but of course all of the unit tests still have to pass before you can deploy to production. So these are used for development and development testing, but production testing you still have to write high-quality code across all of your tests. So the ability to deploy some of Wave elements as part of change sets. So as I said, Wave is starting to become more mainstream within the Salesforce platform. And then just some general enhancements to Sandbox, the Sandbox copy engine, increasing the number of developer sandbox licenses, the ability to run a script after sandbox creation and refresh, which is particularly important for those of you who might need to do something like an email change or maybe change some integration settings, things like that. That can now be automated as part of that sandbox refresh. And then just some improved deployment experience during service upgrades. Those of you who had long-running deployments, they would tend to fail during Salesforce service upgrades, not all of which happen on this thrice annual schedule. They do occasionally do maintenance upgrades. And there were problems with long-running deployments during those upgrades. So now those deployments either fail gracefully or pick back up.
Yeah, the biggest announcement I saw this week, sandboxes, full sandboxes have always been very expensive. And for a while last year, even the partial sandbox was more expensive than the full sandbox based on promotions they were running. As of this summer, with all your enterprise editions, you will now get a free partial sandbox, which is a very big deal.
Yes, absolutely. And I can tell you, as a technical architect, we do not like working with Salesforce customers who do not have full or partial sandboxes. In a perfect world, all of our code would work perfectly at low volume and at high volume and without bugs. However, I have not met a developer working for us or working for anyone else who can develop 100% without bugs. And it's especially difficult to do that if you don't have realistic test data. So it's very important, if you are going to do any significant Salesforce testing, that you have at least a partial sandbox and preferably an enterprise full sandbox to allow you to test your changes and test your code in a realistic environment. And I'll add to that, even if you are not doing development, and in fact, especially if you're using things like headless flows, process builder, approval processes that do not require unit test coverage. Okay, think about that. Salesforce development requires that you at least pretend to write some unit test coverage, right? They don't necessarily enforce proper test-driven development practices, but they do enforce that you at least make sure that every line of your code is touched, or 75% of your code is touched by a unit test. Well, Process Builder doesn't have that restriction. Visual Flow doesn't have that restriction. These can be built by admins who might not have been trained in how to build scalable, reliable, maintainable code. They might write great, and in fact, in many cases, write better business processes, but potentially not as good development. Well, they don't have to run those tests anymore. Makes it even more important that you do those tests in a sandbox with real data, running true user acceptance testing before you use a change set and deploy those into production. So customization changes. Migrate to Lightning Experience like a boss. This is actually the word for word how Salesforce advertises it in their release notes. Now, my boss is a great businessman, runs his business very well. I don't intend to let him anywhere near the Lightning Experience migration process. So this might be a migrate to Lightning Experience like a very experienced IT director. But however you want to think about it, there is now a migration assistant available, and again, I recommend that you test that out in a sandbox because, in my opinion, while I am not going to recommend that every Salesforce customer immediately jump on the Lightning Experience bandwagon with this release, I do think that Lightning Experience in Spring 16 has reached a point where new customers who do not have extensive Visualforce development requirements can now use Lightning Experience out of the box. Most custom objects are supported, most standard objects are supported, and it is still possible to switch back to Salesforce Classic if you need to access some of the setup screens or other screens that are not available yet in Lightning Experience. So it's definitely worth looking at in the Spring 16 release. Other enhancements to data customization. Salesforce continues to improve the data import wizard enhancements, and there have been some changes to support for the data loader. Read the release notes again if you're using the data loader. Personally, I always recommend that you use Jitterbit free data loader or one of the other free data loaders. There are tools from MuleSoft and Informatica as well. Our team personally, for the most part, prefers the Jitterbit free data loader. It's pretty much in every way better than the Salesforce free data loader, except that it's not as easy to script on a Linux box. But otherwise, for an end user, use one of the commercially developed tools, and then you have the option to upgrade to a commercially supported tool for a fee if you choose to. But if you don't want to use an on-premise downloadable or web data loader, Salesforce does have a great data import wizard. And I grew up in the Salesforce ecosystem back using the Salesforce data loader, and then I evolved into the Jitterbit data loader and the MuleSoft data loader. And then I write my own SOAP APIs and REST API interfaces to upload data to Salesforce. And I just never really learned about the Salesforce data import wizard when it was released a couple of years ago. If you are loading data into Salesforce and you know that you have CSV files that you want to load into Salesforce and you want to load them into accounts or contacts or any Salesforce object, check out the data import wizard. It's a great tool and enlightening experience that's actually been added to the standard page layout as well, so you don't have to go into setup to look at that. So general improvements to the process builder, including email alerts for tasks and events, the ability to view field names, and so forth. Again, check out the release notes for a little bit more information about that. I will add that in building out EnablePath's new project management platform, what we found is that almost everything I need to do that I used to do with a trigger, that I just inherently or by default chose to do with a trigger, can be done with Process Builder. I think there might be one or two things that I need to use Visual Flow for, and I'll talk about that at my webinar in the future. But I think I might even be able to get away with no triggers in most situations. So it's definitely worth looking at. Again, just keep in mind that when you're doing this kind of development, you need to have a plan in advance. You need to have a test plan, and you need to have a rollback plan just in case you make a mistake. So changes to security and identity. Salesforce is continuing to improve their security in response to new issues and new concerns that are brought up by the industry, as well as new capabilities that are being added to their platform and to browser platforms. So they've added better two-factor authentication, including, I believe, a new mobile two-factor authentication tool. They now give you the ability to build your own single sign-on provider. I know at least 2 or 3 times in the last couple of months even, we've had customers needing to build their own single sign-on provider so that they can move back and forth between Salesforce communities and some other community platform. So one customer wanted to use single sign-on to move back and forth between their own software as a service product and Salesforce communities. Another customer wanted to move back and forth between an existing community and Salesforce, which is being used for collaboration and knowledge access. And both of those were kind of a little bit clunky experiences from the development side. Well, now you can just write an Apex class, build your own single sign-on provider that's much more likely to work with whatever endpoint you have providing that security assertion. More flexible transaction policies. Again, transaction policies are a way for you to write an Apex class that authorizes API access, desktop or browser login, and report and dashboard access. They do not, at this time, allow you to write an Apex class that grants or denies access to specific pages or grants and denies access to specific records. I'm sure something along those lines is coming, though. I just don't have any timeline on when that might be. And then just generally better support for Salesforce encryption. So if you looked at Salesforce Shield and Salesforce on-premise data or on-disk encryption in the past, and you chose not to use it either because of key rotation concerns or because of API access concerns or because you're using Heroku Connect or one of those other tools that didn't quite work the way you needed it to, check it out. Salesforce Platform Encryption now supports more account and contact fields, including more person account fields, now includes email attachments, allows you to access encrypted data with Heroku Connect, and then also allows communities to access encrypted data. On the Force.com development side, Lightning Components and Lightning Design gives you a lot of early access to a lot of cool technologies. We'll talk about that more on the next webinar. Testing, it is, again, remember, it is possible to run tests in both the current release and the future release. And then Visualforce in Lightning is now supported. I did do a few searches on what this actually means. I haven't had a chance to go in and play with it, but just keep in mind that Visualforce pages, particularly those that try to access the window object in JavaScript or that have links to hard-coded URLs, may need to be slightly rewritten in order to work in Lightning Experience. So I'm hoping that Salesforce is giving us some tools to avoid having to rewrite those Visualforce pages to operate properly within Lightning. On the Apex code side, the ability to locate jobs in the Flex queue, that's great for customers who are using Flex queue. I don't see that a lot right now. What I do see a lot right now is a need for the platform cache. And I understand that every enterprise org does come with a limited amount of platform cache and the ability to buy more. Platform cache is a way for you to potentially speed up your Visualforce pages in particular, although it can be used elsewhere in the platform, and cache the results of either complex long-running transactions or potentially even API calls so that they can be accessed faster in the future. So for those of you who do that kind of development and need that, finally, caching is now available in Salesforce. As before and as always, visit the Salesforce Trailhead site for targeted guided training, developer.salesforce.com/trailhead. I definitely recommend that you start looking at Lightning Experience, start looking at Lightning Components, and Aura training as well. Those are definitely the wave of the future. Just a reminder, getting on my soapbox a little bit here about the impact of Lightning Experience and Lightning Components and all of the Lightning technology, including Process Builder and Visual Flow. What I'm seeing and what I expect to continue is that it is now possible for what EnablePath calls solution architects to do things that used to require a trigger or used to require a Visualforce page. We're not quite seeing that on the page layout side of things. That's still in pilot right now in Spring 16. But with the next release, I think we'll be able to create page layouts in Lightning Experience that maybe used to require a Visualforce page just to achieve the page layout results that you wanted. And we're definitely seeing situations where Process Builder, not even Visual Flow, just Process Builder, which is the spiritual successor to Workflow, can now do things that used to require a trigger. So things like when a parent record is updated, update all of the children, or when a child record is updated, update the parent as well. Or even more complicated things like trigger an approval process automatically, or even trigger an Apex class that has been written to be compatible with Visual Flow or Process Builder. That might be a componentized piece of logic. Rather than having to write a trigger, you could just write the componentized piece of logic, the Apex class, and call it directly from a click-to-configure environment. Okay, so moving on to questions and answers. And John, you should be able to see the Q&A. So if you could do a little bit of research maybe and help me out with this, I'd appreciate it. In the meantime, I'll get started with some of the existing questions. So the first is your project management platform agile or waterfall? We run projects both in agile with a capital A and waterfall with a capital W models. And our project management platform is not intended to be an agile Scrum workplace or a particularly waterfall workplace. It's intended to be an overall consulting project management platform, which means that we have things like issues and risks. We have specific milestones, which for Agile might mean this is when the project is expected to complete. For Waterfall, it might be this is when design is completed, or this is when build is completed, or this is when testing is completed, and so forth. So Agile definitely has milestones, even though in theory you have a sprint duration, or at least in Agile Scrum, you'll have a sprint duration and you might not have a particular predefined milestone. In reality, customers come to us with milestones, right? They have a sales project or a sales meeting that they want to meet, or they have a customer release schedule, or they have a timeline when they're previous existing tool is going to expire its licenses. So every project has timelines, including Agile. We track those timelines. We track project burn. On an Agile project, that might be project burn versus sprint or backlog burn down. On a waterfall model, that might be project log versus estimated, or project burn versus estimated burn, or versus expected burn. So depending on which type of project you're working on, we view it differently. But generally, what we're adding is the ability to add much more granular tracking of hours spent on projects and much more sophisticated and robust tracking of individual issues within Salesforce. And certainly we've been doing that previously, but we've been using a number of different tools, and we're looking to consolidate a lot of those into Salesforce directly. Second question, does the files option still connect to Drive? Yes, it does, I believe. I have not spent a lot of time researching that, but my understanding is that it does still connect to SharePoint, Box, Google Drive, and one other that I'm forgetting, but definitely still supports that. Read the release notes. I know that there have been some enhancements to Files Connect for Google Drive. Next question.
There's a preview option now.
Oh, yes, thank you. Next question, John, if you can look ahead and find out when will Lightning support the standard quote object, if you can do a little bit of research on that. I will answer, has there been any addition to the pages or objects that are supported by Lightning Experience? Yes, definitely. You can look at that in the release notes. Unfortunately, I don't have them in front of me right now. But I believe campaigns are new to Lightning Experience in this release. I believe assets, John, what's the other one? The field service objects are new to Lightning Experience. I believe teams are new to Lightning Experience. And I think support for person accounts is in beta in Lightning Experience, but please don't quote me on that. I could be wrong about that.
Yeah, that's true.
That's correct. Yep.
I have not seen anything about quotes yet. So there is some summer stuff that wasn't mentioned.
My feeling is that quotes are probably coming any day now. I think the back-end logic for quotes is probably not going to change significantly. But what I expect is that what's probably taking so long for quotes is that they have that they have the quote designer where you can go in and actually build out what your quote looks like. And that's what I call Salesforce magic, which is it's an element of Salesforce that is unique to quotes. The ability to create a drag and drop, essentially PDF document that really doesn't mimic the capabilities of any other element within Salesforce. So that's probably what's taking so long. Salesforce is continuing to work on the most heavily used elements, which would be the Sales Cloud. I don't know if that's necessarily the most heavily used, but it's what they chose to lead with. So they'll be leading with the most heavily used elements of Sales Cloud. Then I assume they'll be following up with the most heavily used elements of Service Cloud. And then in the background, they'll be adding in the various individual customized application components of Salesforce as opposed to the platform components of Salesforce. Okay. If there are no other questions, okay, excellent. I will move along. So just a reminder about our upcoming webinar. We'll get a date scheduled for this as soon as possible and let you know when that's ready to go. Don't forget to contact Pam Bryan, 770-995-6691, or pbryan@enablepath.com. If you have any concerns about Lightning Experience or Lightning or simply anything with Salesforce where you need a little bit more support, Pam Bryan manages our support offering, which is a complement to Salesforce Premier Success offerings. We can do everything from ongoing service and support, building dashboards, building reports, to data manipulation, to object creation, field creation, to actual best practice and adoption and usability consulting offered in a support model. So that's a great way to get access to EnablePath consulting services without necessarily creating a full project around that. You can get that in a support environment. So with that, I want to thank everybody for their time. Looks like we got out about 5 or 10 minutes early, so go look out a window, enjoy the day. It's a beautiful sunny day in Atlanta, a little bit chilly. But for those of you who aren't in Atlanta, I hope you're having a great day as well. And thank you so much, and I'll talk to you soon on our next webinar.